Hello everyone, Namaskar. Today on the YouTube channel, we have a very special invitee with us. This is Frank Rausan Pereira, who has recently started his own YouTube channel by the name of Bharata First. You'll find a link in the description and in the video title as well. But before that, he has been an RSTV legend. He was a permanent anchor on Sabha TV, where he would interview India's top policymakers, ask them interesting and insightful questions in order for us and everybody else to gain a lot. In all my preparation years, I have been an avid follower and a big fan of FRP, and to have him here is a great honor. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Namaste. Thank you, Abhijit, for that very warm welcome. I mean, I'm touched, and thank you for having me on your platform. It feels really good to be speaking to you. And yeah, what can I say? Let's go for it.
So, Frank, I've always been interested in knowing that as civil services aspirants, we are obviously supposed to know a number of things. And when I was preparing, I had like 100 different topics that were running in my head. But every time you came up with a new debate on Rajya Sabha TV, you had a lot more insightful questions about those topics than like I had even thought of. So how would you prepare for your debates? How do you collect those questions or bring up those analysis that you would ask your panelists, which used to be a lot of retired defense personnel, a lot of retired senior bureaucrats, and people from senior policy making walks of life. So how did you prepare?
Well, I guess it was more on the lines of years of preparation and not on the spot preparation, because I've always had a habit of reading newspapers. I've been a journalist for about 20 years now, more than that. So when I was at Rajya Sabha TV, I'd already completed about 10 years of work X. By the time I started doing big picture debates, it was about 15 years of work X in journalism. So as a journalist, your mind is tuned to trying to get the best out of every situation. And as a good journalist, you only get better at what you do. And that is what it was. And I was already doing primetime debates and discussions for 5 whole years before that, or more than that, in fact, since 2009. From 2009 onwards, I've been doing primetime discussions and primetime debates. So that also ensured that the groundwork and the foundation was solid and strong. So it only made it easier once I got to sit across the table with highly intellectual people. They made my job easier. It just piqued my interest to ask them anything and everything under the sun. And they would go on because they had eons of experience, some of them over 40 years of experience in their respective fields. So experience is everything. It teaches you a lot. And having to sit with people who had a combined work X of over 100 years, more than a century, you can imagine the kind of knowledge base they come from and the kind of knowledge they bring along with them. So that really helped me along the way in just asking those questions. And I had a habit of, reading about 6 newspapers every day. So
6?
Yeah.
Like, which all newspapers did you read? Just like pick any of them, or
no, not pick any of them. Hindustan Times, Times of India, Indian Express, Mint was a particular favorite because they had really good analyses, really, as far as some of their topics were concerned. Economic Times and Business Standard. These were my 6 go-to newspapers. Somehow, Hindu was never on that list. I don't know why, but yeah, I guess. Yeah, so that also helped, a great deal. When I tell people that I used to read 6 newspapers, I continue to read quite a few of them. Of course, the mode of reading those newspapers has changed now because we've moved to the digital and technological front and side of things. So rather than actually getting the physical newspaper, a lot of this reading happens on the apps of many of these, publications. And the pandemic has also ensured that we make that switch far more easily. It helps the newspaper or the media houses as well, because they were dying a slow death up until the pandemic came through and we saw a digital reformation, if I can call it that. So reading these newspapers made me have a better understanding of things. This question is always asked as to how did you manage to read 6 newspapers. It's very simple. It doesn't take more than 2 hours, really, honestly speaking.
But
Because
I would just like interject here for a moment. It only takes 2 hours if you've been reading them for 10 years. Do that on day one, it'll take you a good 4, 5, 6 hours, right?
Or more, or maybe even more. Because see, even my progression over 20 years has been from 1 newspaper to 2, and then slowly to 3. And then at my peak or at its highest, it was 6. So yeah, that's how it is. So I guess that is what, trained the mind, because what happens when you read is, even though you don't remember immediately, it goes into your subconscious mind, and you have your recall power only increases. So every time you come across a word, or you come across a phrase, or you come across an analysis that is interlinked with the subject at hand, because you have so extensively read about it, your recall value becomes that much more greater, and you can always ask those follow-up questions. None of my debates, none of my discussions were ever rehearsed, prepared, or any of those questions written down on a note, on a piece of paper or anything like that. It was always free-flowing, one point leading into the other. That was because the base was strong. That's important.
Yeah. So, like, when you're talking about base, did you ever prepare for civil services exam?
No, never. I was never really pushed in that direction. I didn't know too much about it. I don't come from a place or from an institution which has too many. I don't know anyone from my school who has been an Indian civil service officer. We've had the greatest of sportsmen coming from my school, someone like a Syed Kirmani, Roger Binney, and many of these cricket legends and footballers, hockey players. Jude Felix, an Indian hockey captain, was from my school. So we had a very, very strong sporting culture, but very less to do with the Indian civil services. So there wasn't much that I knew about the Indian civil services. Had I known earlier, probably before I turned 32, I would have thought of a career in the Indian Foreign Service, but that time has passed now. So yeah,
you can still apply for
long and truly passed.
Yeah, but like you can still apply for one of those lateral entries that are coming up these days, right?
Maybe. Let's see how things progress and how things go. Never know what happens.
What is your take on lateral entries? As somebody who has been, interacting with a lot of civil servants, and as obviously you're running Bharata First, which is all like big platform for civil services aspirants to gain like genuine information about policy issues that India is facing, what are the possible solutions, because you bring on the best panelists, the most informed guests. So what's your take on lateral entries? Is it helpful? Is it good, bad? Like, is it moving us in the right direction?
Helpful, definitely, yes. I think we should have lateral entry. There is no doubt about it, because domain expertise is everything in today's day and age. We are moving into AI, Internet of Things, and all these other aspects. There are certain people that are specifically needed for this job. Even when you look at the economy, if you look at it, I'm glad that the chief economic advisor is taken from outside to get a perspective and to get an idea as to how things go. This experiment is good. Whether it is going to work or not is a big question mark, because the kind of expertise that you bring in, or the kind of experts that you bring in, if you look at how they are doing in the private domain, the salaries don't match. It's not even 1/10 of what they would get in the private domain. So that is one aspect. So how motivated is that person going to be to get into public service from a financial aspect? That is one point. Secondly, the system itself is so rigid. The system itself is so tough. Acclimatization, assimilation is going to be difficult for someone new who's going to come into the system, because that person is always going to be looked at as an outsider. There is also this thought that comes into the picture that, this person has come in because of some kind of influence. And thirdly, once the posting is completed, or once, say, for instance, someone is taken in for a brief period of time, there is this whole issue of conflict of interest as well. And what they're going to do with this domain, where they're going to take it and go, and the kind of contacts that they've had in the past, are they going to be benefited as a result of this person being in a powerful position within the system itself? These are some question marks that always crop up and come up, and they need to be addressed. But the idea as a whole is good. And, it's a system that works in the United States. The president gets to pick and choose whom he wants and how the person serves. And it has worked. It is not like the system hasn't worked. So it can be done here as well. But I think we need a mix of both, so that the best of all worlds can be taken forward.
So I'm glad that you brought up US as an example of this, because US is obviously US has no fixed bureaucracy to say. It has a very limited fixed bureaucracy, which is the lower levels of bureaucracy, something like undersecretaries, deputy secretaries in India, and everything above that is directly handpicked and helicopter dropped in by the president or the executive that is chosen. But at the same time, this exact problem that you're saying, that, what are the conflicts of interest? How are these people going to be behaving while they're in government public service? And once they go out, and the US has developed this, what I personally consider to be a very negative culture of you picking people from industry, they coming into government, making legislation that suits the private, and then going back and serving in those privates all over again. So I do hope that we put in some safeguards against the things like that.
There are safeguards against things like that, because if you see a lateral entrant, he doesn't reach the highest place in office. At the end of the day, those calls are taken by secretary level officers and the government at hand. Yeah. So to become a secretary, not everyone can retire as a secretary as well. Secretary Government of India is a big post. Even though about 700, 800, or maybe 150, say, IAS officers get through the system every year. Not all of them are going to be Secretary Government of India. There is only going to be a handful. I've not done the math, but I guess if you do the math, maybe about 10% of them would, 10 to 12% may end up being Secretary Government of India. So not everyone can, there are so many things that have to go according to plan and have to go your way for you to eventually reach where you are. So a lateral entrant is eventually not going to get there. But then you can also make the argument, more recently we saw the controversy in Sri Lanka about electricity project being awarded to the Adani Group. Yeah. So you don't have to be in the system to get things your way. See, right now it's all in the speculative realm, but there's no smoke without fire. So something must have happened, and we all know not too many people speak about it, but there is an undercurrent that says that some of the big time businessmen and honchos get their way at the end of the day. So whether you're in the system or outside the system, if you have to get things done and you want to get things done, you will get them done any which ways.
So I think Mark Twain had this famous quote that government servants have an immense amount of power, but if you look at their salaries, they're a meager pittance as compared to the amount of power that they wield, the amount of influence that they wield. And according to him, the entire scheme was set up in such a way that it becomes much more easier to manipulate this person. Why? Because the financial incentives are structured in such a way that it becomes so much more easier. And this is also something that you mentioned, that when people are coming in lateral entry wise, in the corporates, they're earning salaries of maybe, let's say, 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 1 CR, even at maybe their mid 30s, early 40s. And once you come into the government, your max salary is capped at 2.5 lakhs per month, right? Which is the salary of the Secretary of Government of India. So do you think that there is a financial mismatch to the amount of power that these people have as bureaucrats versus the financials, that the Government of India's structure is much more heavy, financially speaking, at the lower rungs, meaning somebody who gets into the government? One of the reasons why government jobs are favored is even if you get it at a starting position, you get a salary of 20 to 25,000. But it does not scale up much more. At the secretary, that 25,000 can become 2.5 lakhs. That's about it. In the corporate, it starts from, let's say, 7 to 8,000, but it scales up to, let's say, 7 CR. So
absolutely.
Do you think that this system in itself needs to be reformed some way, changed some way? And consider that we're not experts over here. We're just speculating.
It's not about speculation. I think we know enough about how the system works, enough about how much people get paid and what kind of lives they have. At least I watched it from very close quarters in my time working for the Parliament of India. I've had a good almost 10 years, 1 decade working very closely with bureaucrats and those who wield this power that you're talking about. A coin has 2 sides, and you always think that the grass is greener on the other side, but it's not really the case. We look at the salary mismatch or the financial mismatch that you're talking about. Don't forget, the government sector brings along with it different positives. Job security is one of them. The reason why so many people, if you look at Uttar Pradesh, 200 pune positions, there are about 6,000 PhDs that apply. First and foremost, I don't know how they get these PhDs, but nonetheless, PhD is a PhD, but he's going to apply for a government's job, even if it is for a pune's job, because he knows that there is job security there. And let's not forget that the system is so corrupt that that if you get into the system, there are ways and means that you can always get that extra buck. And that is another reason why people want to get into, government service. That having been said, not everybody is like that. There are some really honest, really good officers. I've come across them in my lifetime as well. Wonderful people who want to serve the nation, who want to do the best that they possibly can in their capacity. And they have incentives too. For instance, who's going to get you and me can never think of getting a house in Chanakyapuri, for instance, Lutyens Delhi. A house there would cost you about, I don't know, I don't even want to do the math. Yeah. So they also get access to the best clubs around town. Access so that their kids can go there, they can have a game of golf, they can have their swimming lessons and whatnot. These are all perks that come along with the job. You don't have to pay for your electricity bill, or even if you do, it's minimal. You get allowance for your furniture and so many other things. So your salary basically goes straight into the savings account and nowhere else. So if you have a tendency and if you have a mindset to save for a rainy day and save for the future, you can live comfortably with that salary and with that money, live more than comfortably, live a lavish life, in fact. So, but if you're going to expect to get a salary of 2 CR or 3 CR or 5 CR or 7 CR, like you were talking about, it's out of the question. It's out of the way. But that 7 CR job comes with its own problems. It comes with its own headaches. Yeah. So somewhere, there are positives here and there are positives there as well. And it depends on what kind of person you are and where you want to take it. See, the kind of paraphernalia that you get being Secretary Government of India, you have someone, you have an orderly, you have someone taking care of your house, you have someone taking care of many other things and many other aspects. That is not something that you'll get in the private sector at all.
So on that note, for instance, if I'm just talking in terms of, how would you say, structure of the job or how it's made up, I've always felt that the CEO of a corporate is very similar to Secretary Government of India. You're head of a huge organization. You're not going to be doing the actual work. You're setting the policies. You're creating the design which enables a lot of people to get work done in a particular direction. Right. And similar to what you say, that you've got orderlies, peons, you've got drivers, a CEO of a corporate also has those things. Right. And if the corporate is so inclined, they will get a house in Chanakyapuri on company expense. That part is separate. But that's what I've always felt, that if you look at simply, how these jobs are designed, then I've always felt that Secretary, Government of India, and a CEO of a corporate, maybe let's say 30,000. A simpler example would be that some PSUs are government sector undertakings which have some of these bureaucrats as CEOs. So they've already got that experience. And in that sense, obviously, if you talk about some of the bigger departments, for Ministry of Housing, not departments, Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Defense, these are much, much, much bigger than any corporate houses. There will be only a few CEOs in India who are bigger than these secretaries. Right. For instance, like we talked about the Adani Group, there'll be Reliance. There'll be very few people who will be bigger CEOs than the Secretary Finance, Government of India. Right. So in that sense, well, there's not a lot of difference, just the difference in compensation, which I've always felt is something that has rankled me somewhere. But I'm sure that's also something that the Government of India is considering and figuring out, because the pay scales keep coming up every so often, which try and rectify some of these errors. Not a lot, but they do to a certain extent. So coming to another thing that you had mentioned, that like we're switching tack, going away from this entire topic. You had mentioned that when you read so as extensively as you have, you organize or put in that piece of information somewhere in your head. It's in your subconscious. You don't know when it'll come into use. But I've always felt simply reading is fine, but you also need a structure of information inside your head in order for you to be able to file that piece somewhere in a category, because only when you have categories of information in your head will you be able to recall that information when required. What's your take on that? How do you organize information inside your head?
That, I guess, some neurologist or neurosurgeon or psychologist has to probably go into my head and figure that out. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but it works for me. Whether it happens naturally or whether it happens because so much of information is going in, I don't really know. I'll just come back to this in a bit. Let me go back to a point that you were making earlier about, the CEO of a company and Secretary Government of India. The main difference, the fundamental difference is the CEO looks out for profit for his company.
Exactly.
Even at a larger scale. But Secretary Government of India looks at the public interest at large. That is the biggest difference really between the two and biggest distinguishing point really as far as a CEO and a secretary is concerned. Now coming back to this about information. Over a period of time, if you look at news and if you look at information, most of it is repetitive. It's only with changing time, a little bit of information here and there changes, the people change, and maybe the policies, one or two of them change here and there. So what happens over a period of time is this knowledge, this information accumulates. It gets stored. Our brain, our mind is a beautiful organ. It's something that, scientists and doctors have spent hundreds of years to try and decipher, but they have not been able to. That itself is
not been able to fully.
Not been able to fully, yes.
Everything. Some of it.
You have a heart transplant, you have a lung transplant, you have a liver transplant, you have everything. You never heard of a brain transplant. That doesn't happen. So that's what I mean. They've not been able to fully understand this particular organ. They've not been able to understand how it works, fully. But it's beautiful. It's a marvelous creation. And that information that goes in, it might have gone in 10 years ago, but you have the uncanny knack and ability to think and recall and bring it up 10 years later. And it feels like deja vu. That's something that I've noticed. I've not done too much research and gone into it, but I guess if you just get into a habit of reading, whether or not you have organized thoughts, whether or not you process it the way it is supposed to be processed, it always stays in there and it helps in the long run. Knowledge is like infinity. It's like space. So the more you gather, the more you collect. It doesn't mean a vessel is getting filled up. It goes on and on and on.
The vessel also expands.
Because it's infinity, it's space. It's connected to the universe. At the end, the mind is connected to the universe. If you go back into Indian knowledge, Indian history, and Indian scriptures, they very clearly talk about the connection between the mind and the universe and space itself. So that it is infinity.
There's a very
at the end
simple line that's put in the Upanishads, which is Tattvam Asi, that you are. Aham Brahmasmi. So like all of these things are obviously a reiteration of the same idea that you are not separate from the universe. You're made up of the same particles and it's all the same thing. It's just somewhere along the way you've developed this tiny bit of idea called consciousness, which is kind of sort of like messing with your own head as to what's happening. But in the end, you are nothing but a part of the universe.
We are fractals of the universe, if I can put it simply. That's what we are.
There are memes on the internet which go that a human being is the universe's way of looking at itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you develop consciousness and then you see the universe and then you're like, oh my God, this is so great. And then you realize, okay, this is me. But again, something to be done. So on that note, you said that, reading a lot will obviously in time make it easier for you to recall information, develop all of these habits of bringing up things that you've read 10 years ago. And basically what we were talking about is collecting a lot of information, which then would be recalled as required. But opinions or forming opinions is slightly different from just an aggregation of collection of facts, right? So how would you say that somebody who is beginning with, let's say, exam preparation or in general wants to start reading newspapers, how do they start developing opinions which are more than just a collection of facts?
Developing your own opinions is a tricky slope that you have to climb, because if you're going to be opinionated, you're going to be biased as well. What is an opinion? An opinion is somebody else's biasness. That's all. There's nothing more to it. And that's why when you look at Op India or you look at the Hindu, the kind of opinion pieces that you get are very, very different because it's the kind of people that write there. So if someone wants to get a clear idea and a clear understanding as to how things work, it's good to look at responsible media houses, responsible writers, responsible commentators who don't take extreme viewpoints and then understand what they are saying. Eventually, as your opinions grow, eventually, as your horizon expands, you look at both ends of the spectrum. You look at a Hindu and you look at an op-ed as well. You look at an op India as well. And then you get in as much information as you possibly can, and then decide what is best for you. Because in India, we have, very interestingly, each one of us has an opinion about everything.
Yeah.
So it's good to get as much information as possible so that you're better informed and then come up with that opinion. Also, if you're going to be opinionated, you better decide where these opinions are going. As long as you're having a casual conversation with your friend, it's fine. It doesn't matter what you say. You can speak openly like me about Adani or Reliance or the Prime Minister or Rahul Gandhi or anybody.
Yeah.
But then if I'm going to be applying for a government job, if I'm going to take up the UPSC examination, if I'm writing my mains, I cannot go and criticize, the bulldozing, whatever is happening with the bulldozers.
Like you can criticize policies.
As you can criticize policies.
Well designed, or
you can criticize use of bulldozers as well. Not at all a problem, but also talk about how it is a legitimate means that the administration has to use. Usage of a bulldozer is not illegal at the end of the day, but
it's not illegal, but is it the right amount of power? Is it something that should be done in this case? That is something that you can criticize.
Absolutely. So that is what needs to be brought in, and how you bring that in is going to be important. You can't blatantly say, for instance, that demonetization has been the greatest blunder that this country has ever seen. You can put it in if you want. You can say, demonetization was carried out to try and address certain challenges that existed in the system at that point in time. In hindsight, now we can say that it did not achieve its intended goals. However, there were certain spin-offs like the digital economy and digital India. That's how you'll have to put it in.
Yeah.
So you criticized also, you're talking about how it has not achieved its intended goals, how so many people had to suffer as a result of demonetization. And
at the same time, we're getting something out of it, which was not the intended consequence, but which has been beneficial for the country overall.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So again, like, for instance, demonetization is, I would say, politically slightly more neutral than something like bulldozing. So preferably if you're preparing for government exams, like stay away from the political side of things. Because politics is a lot more complicated. Politics has a lot more facets, and till the time you're not clear on those multiple angles, it can be very problematic to put them out in exam papers.
Absolutely. And if I may just add here, there's no right or wrong in any of this. And UPSC is extremely objective. That is something that we have to give the UPSC. Now, if you're going to say something is right or something is wrong, you have to come up with good reasoning as to why you're saying it is right or why you're saying it is wrong. It's the argument that you put forth is going to be more important than whether you're saying it is right or wrong.
Agreed.
That is what is important. And that is something that is a knack that young aspirants and students need to learn, which doesn't come easily.
So how do they go about learning this?
So, like I said, one example that I just gave you was that of demonetization. So you'll have to look at it from, you'll have to be objective in your approach. Keep biasness outside. Be objective in your approach. Have the requisite information to talk about why it is right and why it is wrong. And then you be convinced about whether it is right or wrong. And then put that in words. That's what you need to do.
On this entire note, because obviously I've gone through this entire journey as a young graduate back in 2014 when I just graduated from college. The first thing I realized was, I need to have some opinions. It was a very premature thought on my end that, I have to have some opinions. I didn't know what to do, what to read. I'd read a lot. I figured I knew things. And for me, having an opinion meant that, I have to be neutral everywhere, that I can't take a stand, which later on, I realized is not an opinion. It is just like equivocating. You're not doing anything. You're just not taking this side. You're not taking this side. You're not taking any side. And without taking a side, you don't take action, right? So the solution for that I personally figured out was that your stand or your opinion derives from your values. And till the time you're not clear on what your values are, you will not take any stand which you stick by. Because if a stand does not derive from your core values, let's say, for instance, you would be somebody who believes strongly in the Indian culture, right? So that is one of your values. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, right? So in that case, you know that any stand you take will have that value in consideration. And any stand that does not have that value in consideration will be a stand that you're liable to change more often, right? So this is what I realized early on during my preparation days, that it's very, very important to have a clear idea of what my values are. And this is something that I've been telling aspirants who have come with us for the interview stage of the civil services exam, for mains, for any other stage, that figure out what your values are. And seems like a very simple thing, right, to figure out what your values are, but turns out it's one of the hardest things that you can do because it requires a lot of introspection. So what's your take on this? How does one go about clarifying their values?
It's very difficult, first and foremost, because then what happens is you have blinders on. I'll tell you why. You're constantly looking at your values. You're constantly looking at what is right and what is wrong. If you look at the later religions, Christianity had the 10 commandments. Why did it have the 10
commandments? Was a bit earlier than Christianity, but okay.
But why does Christianity follow the 10 commandments? It's simple, because during that time, the people needed that.
Simple instructions.
Simple instructions to carry out, because you're dealing with barbarians. Right? So that's why you needed that, and that's when it was successful, it succeeded.
Whatever it is that you're doing, you need to remember that there is somebody or something greater than you, which is also something that Hinduism does. Like, you remember, a lot of houses, even in my house till up to a certain point, we used to have Tulsi Puja in the morning, early morning, right? There used to be the Aarti at sundown. Why is that? The entire idea is during the day, multiple times, you need to be reminded, because you will forget. We are forgetful creatures. And that's what also is required for civil services exam to a certain extent. You will forget the information, keep revising, just like you keep recalling the name of God. So I don't know, I don't particularly agree with the whole slave analogy, because slaves came in later.
Yes, definitely. I agree with you completely on that. But that was one of the theories. And if you look at it, it becomes so much more simpler. It becomes so much more easier to deal with thousands of people that you're dealing with in a camp.
Yeah.
Right. So there are many theories. If you look at anthropology as a whole, if you look at why have Homo sapiens thrived, whereas the Neanderthals, perished. This is not just one theory. There are at least 7 or 8 theories describing why this has happened. So even with Islam, it is just one of the theories. Now, who's right or who's wrong is very difficult to say today, because we weren't alive then. We weren't present there. So it's very difficult for us to understand that. But what was the point we were making before that? I completely forgot your question.
Values. How do we clarify values?
How do we clarify values? So values, at the end of the day, you need to have values of your own, because that becomes an area and that becomes a yardstick for you to make your decisions on. But more important than your own values are societal values and values of a collective, because the values that you are instilled with may be very different from what the values of somebody else are. For instance, someone who grows up in a city, someone who's lived all his life, say for instance in Mumbai, or lived all his life in, say for instance, Bangalore being a highly cosmopolitan city. Bangalore is probably the only city in India where you can survive only with English and no other language. Now, say for instance,
no, man, I've been to Bangalore. People, at least the auto walas, are very, very like, no, Kannada. The very, it's like absolute chaos, I'd say, in terms of what they charge, man. Like
that is different. No, that is a different aspect altogether. I mean, you have
digressing there.
Yes, you have people like that who want to make money, like we were talking about earlier as well. At the end of the day, everyone wants to earn a living, and they're going to use unscrupulous means and methods to get that as well. But if you go to a shop, you can survive with English. If you go to a fruit vendor, you can survive with English. Auto walas are a different breed altogether. You know, they can't be considered to be localites or people who you deal with on it, even though you do deal with them on a daily basis, but they're a different breed. Let's leave them aside. Now, you know, as far as so someone has lived all his life in Bangalore, someone who's done everything in Bangalore, someone who eventually gets through the system and becomes a DM somewhere, say for instance in rural Jharkhand, right? Now his values in Bangalore, his values growing up will be very different from the values of the tribals, say for instance in Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh. So it's very important to change with the times, and it's very important to look at the values as a collective. Because you're working for them, you're working towards their betterment, and the only thing that is paramount and is most important for a civil servant is public service. Public service comes first. So those values need to relate with the rules and times of the ground and of the land. That is more important than personal values. Personal values are very good for your personal boundaries, but as a civil servant, it's good to understand things around you as well.
So can we simply say that there exists a certain set of values which can be called public service values, which it would be ideal for
I didn't think of that. Yes, that's the perfect way to coin that.
Right. There are some public service values that each and every individual aspiring for civil services should have, because these are the values which will discount your personal values to a certain extent, keeping in view that it is the people, it is the citizens whose collective values are important, but at the same time, you must not be led completely by their values, because that is one of the things that Gandhiji said, that I would like to welcome each and every culture into my house, but I refuse to be blown away by anyone. Right, which means that he wants to stay rooted in his own culture. So on that note, I simply always recommend to people that the values, if you're unclear about your own values, go with constitutional values. Our constitution has given us like a beautiful set of values: right to equality, right to freedoms, right to life and liberty. And all of these are fundamental things, right to freedom of religion, right to minority rights, like right to constitutional remedies. All of these are basic fundamental rights and values that if you're unsure about what your values are, these are good values to start with. Then obviously, ideally, you should figure out what your own values are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Right. So coming to a couple of things from your career, what were your biggest learnings as an anchor, as a primetime TV host on Rajya TV?
Biggest learnings, I wouldn't categorize it as biggest learnings. I think the experience, dealing with so many intellectual people on a daily basis, day in and day out. I would meet at least 4 or 5 individuals, like I mentioned earlier as well, with combined experience of over a century. The kind of knowledge that they would bring to the table, the kind of discussions that I would have before and after the show. The show was different. That was something that was available to everyone. It was for the public. But the kind of discussions and the kind of information that I was privy to before the actual big picture discussion and after was eye-opening, was beautiful. These guys would talk about all these things that happened during emergency, all these things that certain prime ministers would do and wouldn't do, the kind of politics that prevailed, what kind of lives politicians live, and all those aspects, all those
the chatpata aspects of power.
Not necessarily chatpata aspects of power, but yes, chatpata aspects too. Those would bring about a hearty laugh as far as we were concerned. But even the other aspects of policy, about how things have changed, how we've evolved as a nation, and how we've put our best foot forward, how India's foreign policy, for that matter, has changed. What were some of the things that were done behind closed doors by diplomats and visiting ministers and others? All this information, all these stories at the end of the day were wonderful to listen to. And that is what made me a better person and made me a better human being and made me a more knowledgeable individual as well. That's what I would say was the biggest takeaway for me.
So I think for all the aspirants that we are guiding for the personality test, this is also one of the things that I told them every time that they went for a mock interview or when they were, feeling jittery about what to do, not to do, all of those things. I simply said that, these are also people. The people who will be taking your interview, be it a UPSC chairperson member or, the panel of 5 people that will be there. All of these are people. But at the same time, remember one thing, that each of these people has an experience of at least 30 years. So you've got before you 150 years of experience minimum. You can't bluff in front of that. Like that's absolutely fatal because they have so much more info. You're not even 30. Each of them has 30 years of experience. So like you said, they have such a plethora and such a wide, diverse experience that it's very, very difficult to bluff in front of these people. And I think you've also been one of the panelists for, I think Vajiram, you were telling me, right? So how has that experience been? How have you found guiding aspirants?
I've been guiding aspirants now at Vajiram for over 4 years. So it's been a long journey and it's been very interesting. It's been positive. It's been wonderful interacting with young minds, young impressionable minds, knowing that they want to go and do so much service to the nation. There's so much that they want to do as far as this country is concerned. And the experience has been great. It's been a learning experience for me too, because knowledge is a two-way process. It can't be just a one-way street. If you're going to keep yourself close to getting information in, you're going to be the loser. So it's important to understand and learn from every situation. It's the situation that teaches rather than anything else. So the more that you can take away from a situation, the better that you will be as a human being. And the other panelists as well, several of them, Secretary, Government of India, retired ambassadors, and so on and so forth. The discussions that we have while waiting for certain candidates, by the time they, go in and come out and all of that, and the kind of notes that we share, it's brilliant. It's amazing. It's good to be sitting with all these distinguished gentlemen and ladies as well. And it has been a great learning process and a big learning curve for me too.
And how has life as a YouTuber been for you? Because I think you started out your YouTube channel sometime in 2021, right?
2021. It's been about a year and a month or so. So far, so good. It has been good. The experience has been positive. YouTube is a great platform. It has ensured that I've connected with an audience, stayed connected with that audience, and it's real-time feedback that you get through YouTube as well. That is what is amazing. And you get honest feedback too. When you meet some people in person, they are overwhelmed by the person in front of them. So they might not be as forthcoming as they would be otherwise.
On a YouTube comment.
Yeah, but hiding behind the Japanese anime character, the choicest of words also come out. The choicest of phrases also come out. So it's interesting to see that aspect as well. I must say, sometimes, of course, you do get hurt by some of the comments that come through, because your intention is, you're doing these things with the best intention in mind, knowing that you're trying to help as many people as possible. It hurts to see certain comments because it's very easy to hide behind, an unknown face and then say something. But otherwise, by and large, I must say the kind of love that I've received, the kind of support that I've received, the kind of, comments and everything else, everywhere that I go, it has been incredible. It has been an awesome journey. If I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again. Many people were wondering why I quit Rajya Sabha TV, why I would let go of such a plush and such a stable job when lakhs of people aspire to be in that position, to get into the system and get into a government job. I was someone who went away. So a lot of people questioned my judgment, questioned why I was doing this. But the only intention is to look at the bigger picture and try and do something in service of the nation and the people. That's the only reason.
So I think in our previous conversation, you also mentioned that you're doing something with regards to improving education for the country as a whole, for, one of the things that you want to give back to society. So please do tell us a little bit more about that.
So a lot is happening on that front. We as a family have decided to do a lot with regards to education and change the way the education system is in the country. The national education policy, the new one, of course, is a step in the right direction and is moving in that way. But there are challenges, there are roadblocks, because on paper, like any other policy, it looks great. Implementation is going to be key, like many other projects in India and several of the projects that we've carried out abroad, be it in Bhutan, be it in Nepal, Afghanistan, elsewhere, everywhere. We've not implemented many of these policies and projects very well. So as far as this is concerned as well, the national education policy talks about how we are going to bring back Indian ethos, Indian culture, and a lot about the Indian knowledge system back into the existing way of education. I'm working with some like-minded people in touch with the PMO. We recently made a presentation to someone from the PMO about what we need to inculcate and what we need to bring in as far as the Indian culture aspect and Indian knowledge center base is concerned. So that work is going on parallelly. I'm trying to work with students in the age group of 18 to 34 or youngsters in the age group of 18 to 34. My wife is working with the age group of -0 till about 16, 17. So there's something called as Garbha Sanskara, if you are familiar with the Sanatana Dharma way of life. So it talks about inviting a spiritual baby into the womb and trying to ensure that the baby gets the kind of nourishment that is required from the spiritual realm itself, and that is something that is there in our ancient Indian knowledge base. So that is something that she's working on as well. So we are trying to bring out the best in each and every one of us. The reason why Nalanda and Takshashila burned for so many months and why they were destroyed was not because they were universities, but because of the treasure trove of knowledge that they had in them. And that is something that the invaders and the Britishers understood very well. And that's why they tried and get as much information out of there and take it back, because these are golden words that can never be replicated, that can never come back to us. And India has traditionally been a knowledge hub and a knowledge center as well. That's what we're trying to rekindle and trying to bring back into the forefront, so that we get the best of what was available to us in the past.
So, best of luck with that, obviously. And I do hope you find success in your ventures, because you have been one of the people who has been a treasure trove of information for me to gain from. And it's been a belated realization, but I realized that teachers and educators and people who are disseminating information are serving a very, very critical role in society. And for me, you were one of those notes. I do hope and wish that you achieve all the success that you plan for. And if there's anything else that you'd like to share with the students and aspirants for civil services exam, because that is the primary audience that watches this channel, please.
Thank you for your kind words, first and foremost. And it's not just my success, it is our success at the end of the day, because if we succeed in doing what we do with regards to the education system and move away from rote learning, we are going to be better individuals and we're going to be better Bharatiyas. As far as the civil services aspirants and that community is concerned, all I'll say is dream and you shall achieve. I remember someone who was on my platform in a show called FRP on the Hot Seat that we do. We run a quiz and all of that. And the person who wins the quiz at the end of the day gets a chance to, the mega quiz gets a chance to put me on the hot seat and ask them questions. So the first winner of that program was someone called Ramya CS. She has secured the 51st rank this time around in the UPSC CSE 2021. And this was her 6th attempt, her last attempt, and she comes from a poor background, a humble background. She's worked really hard to get to where she is, taking odd jobs here and there because she lost her father early on and she had to support her mother and everyone else. But she never gave up on her dream. 5 attempts, she never got through the prelims phase or the mains phase, I guess. I think she failed in 2 prelims. Then she got through to the mains twice, or 3 prelims, 2 mains. And then this time she went all the way and ensured that she got through. Anirudh Durishetty is also one of those people, who ensured that they got in the last attempt. So if you have a dream, don't let it go, because dreams eventually come true. Work hard, work smart, and you will realize your dreams. But that having been said, also have a plan B It's not bad to have a plan B, because it's something that you can fall back on. You shouldn't be in a situation at the end of the day when you finally give up and exhaust yourself on the attempts that you don't know where to go and you don't know where you are. You shouldn't feel like a fish out of water. What you should have is a plan B, and you should start working towards that plan B as well. Sometimes plan B can be better than plan A. Unless you've actually tasted it and realized it and witnessed it, how will you know whether that was what was made for you? So just remember that. That's it, Abhijit. I have nothing more to say. I would like to wish all the aspirants and all those who are aspiring to get into the Indian public service the very best. May Ishwara bless you all.
And thank you for your time, and thank you for having this conversation, Frank.
Thank you so much for having me on your platform, Abhijit. It has been an excellent experience. We've spent quite a good amount of time talking about several of those aspects. Yes, almost an hour now. So thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure. And I wish you too the very best in everything that you're doing. You're a bright young man who has the entire world at your feet, who can do anything and can achieve anything. And I know that you'll do us all proud. Thank you. Namaste.